My name is Ed Davies, and I'm a proud member of the Bright Promises Foundation Board and chair of the Youth and Program Committee. Thank you for joining us for the second night of our two-night celebration. If you were not able to join us last night, we encourage you to watch the video of last night's 2020 awards presentation on our website at brightpromises.org. Tonight, we will share an engaging panel discussion with leaders in the fields of childhood trauma, violence prevention, and children's mental health. We know the current unrest in the world, from the coronavirus to the fight for social and racial justice, to the many problems that continue to plague our communities, has taken a heavy toll on our children and youth, and many of us as well. At Bright Promises, we are committed to finding solutions and providing support to address these issues. From our impressive panel tonight, you will learn what actions you can take to support children and youth, especially with the challenging school year about to begin. But first, we will share a brief video with you about the Bright Promises Foundation and our mission to create opportunities for Chicago children and youth to reach their full promise and potential. Thanks again for joining us tonight.
Time and again, Bright Promises Foundation has risen to the challenge and reinvented how we serve children and families. We are experts at adapting and evolving. At Bright Promises, we identify and support innovative programs that address children's under-recognized needs. Before the current pandemic hit, we already identified social-emotional learning, or SEL, as an essential part of children's mental health. Since 2016, we have been successfully helping thousands of parents across Chicagoland to promote positive coping skills and help their children to manage stress and trauma. Because of the current pressures so many children and families are under, these social-emotional learning programs are more essential than ever before. We were ahead of the curve, and now we are taking our proven effective models and expanding this work. COVID-19 has spurred us on. In addition to growing our social-emotional learning programs, as part of our COVID-19 response, we are also supporting 4 direct service areas that are not being addressed by other funds or funders: food and shelter for homeless children and families, child abuse prevention and services, child care for essential workers, and children's mental health services. Through the Bright Promises COVID-19 Response Fund, we are supporting the immediate needs of low-income children and families, while also providing a lifeline to the agencies serving low-income families, ensuring that the infrastructure necessary for recovery remains intact. With systemic injustice, inequity, disinvestment, and racism denying opportunity for Black and Brown children at every turn, we remain more committed than ever to building the more just and equitable society that our children deserve. There is so much that we can all do to help support children and youth, and with your help, Bright Promises is committed to expanding our programs so that we can reach even more children and families. Even though we cannot be together right now, we are taking action to help the children and families who need it most. We are doing important work, relevant work, necessary work. Join us.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again tonight for the second night of our two-part celebration of the Bright Promises Foundation and our award season. I'm Ed Davies. I'm a board member for the Bright Promises Foundation, and I chair the Program and Youth Committee. And I'm really excited to be here with you tonight and also bringing together a panel of experts to discuss how we can better support children and their mental health during this crisis period, especially as we're beginning to open schools again, and knowing that that will create a lot of stress, not only for children, but for their parents as well. There are many overlapping issues that are compounded right now because of the stress and trauma that children are under. All of these issues impact children's mental health. Some of these issues include the COVID-19 crisis, the current conditions around social justice and racial justice, the return to school, and also spikes in community violence this summer. Many of these issues that children and parents are facing are ongoing and predate the current situation and have been exacerbated by what's going on. Bright Promises and our community of experts have already been working on these issues for several years now. And tonight we want to offer you a measured and thoughtful response that acknowledges the ongoing complexity of what is happening in our communities and provides meaningful and actionable steps that you can take to support the young people in your community. The experts that we brought together today are all past or current program partners that have worked closely with Bright Promises to advance our work. They are part of the community of leaders, innovators, and change makers that make up Bright Promises Foundation. They represent our mission in action. And so the goal for today's conversation is to provide insight and provide resources and information that you can use to help support not only parents, but also the children and the caregivers and our community at large. And so I'm gonna stop talking now and allow our panel to introduce themselves. Lisa.
Hello, my name is Liza Suarez. I'm a psychologist. I'm the co-director of the Urban Youth Trauma Center at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And the Urban Youth Trauma Center focuses on addressing the needs of youth and families impacted by trauma and community violence. And we provide resources and support to anyone who's working with youth in the community so that they can be better able to support kids impacted by trauma.
Thanks for joining us. Amanda.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thrilled to join you all. I am Amanda Walsh. I'm the director of the Illinois Children's Mental Health Partnership, or ICMHP. ICMHP was founded in 2003 through a state law, and we are a state task force with partners, experts from around the state, and legislators and representatives from different state agencies. And we are tasked with monitoring the children's mental health system and making recommendations on how to improve the system for children and their families. So again, thrilled to be here.
Great, and glad you can join us. Norman?
Yes, good evening. My name is Norman Kerr. I am the director of the Office of Violence Reduction for the City of Chicago. This is a new office that came in with the Lightfoot administration. September makes a year that I've been here, so I'm excited. We have a lot of work to do, but we are laying a good foundation. We want to see violence reduced in Chicago. My work has been around addressing violence, but also considering the other factors. So looking at how trauma plays a role, how communities play a role as well, and how families play a role. So this is something that we have to address comprehensively. We know that violence is an issue, but mental health is certainly an issue as well. And this is something that it's not going to go away. So we have to put all our heads together and address these issues as a group. Thank you.
Well said. Yeah, so we will see, and you will hear tonight, that there's a lot of interconnectivity, a lot of intersectionality between many of the issues that we discussed. None of these are isolated or siloed, and there's no one solution that will solve each of these, but it's going to take multiple solutions across many domains, across many stakeholders in the work that we do. And that's represented by the diversity that we have on the panel and their perspectives. So we'll jump right into to the questions, and we'll ask the panelists to just share their responses and their perspective on each, and hopefully tools that we all can use in our lives and working with young people that we know of or deal with on a daily basis. And so, Lisa, I'm gonna start with you. And every day we see a lot in the news around what's happening related to this COVID crisis. We see in the news a lot of what's happening just on the social and racial justice front. And, everybody's bombarded with information across the political spectrum, whether, you're far to the left or far to the right or everything in the middle and independent. How do we help children and youth understand and process current events in a healthy way, especially when there's so much being shared with them through traditional and social media?
Absolutely. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that there are many challenges and that there are things that everybody's going through. And so we're all sharing difficulties. We're impacted, some of us are impacted by them differently than others, but we're all having stressors that are due to the global pandemic, the health impacts, the economic impacts, the fact that we need to stay away from each other, and then the other stressors due to injustice and inequality that take a toll on some more vulnerable groups. And so what we want to stress to kids is that first and foremost, these challenges are not the fault of any one person or any one group of people, but that there are many things that have happened and continue to happen at the societal community and perhaps even at the family level that may have gone unaddressed that have compounded the effects of these challenges. So a global pandemic is something that doesn't happen very often, but it's exposing a lot of other challenges, and I think it's important to understand that it's impacting all of us, and we're trying to come to solutions. So it's not important to just know what is happening and why, but also that in the midst of these challenges, we do have some options to manage the situation. There are things that we can do as a family, as a community, to try to stay safe and protect each other, and also to speak up and speak out. So we want to give them some understanding that's developmentally appropriate, and as well as knowing that there are things that we can do, and hopefully we'll go into more detail as we go on with this conversation.
Thanks. Norman or Amanda, anything you would add to that answer?
Yeah, I'll add that I think the idea of checking in with young people about current events is something that should take place anyway. You know, I just think on a regular basis, we should be hearing their voice about different things that they're experiencing, because what they're going through are things that we didn't go through as adults, you know, when we were younger. So just that initial acknowledgement is important. But certainly during this time where there's so many things that are happening at the same time, I mean, adults don't even know how to handle this stuff, you know. So I just think this is a time where years from now is when we're really going to be able to process like the impact of like everything that's happening at this time, you know. So we talk about economic situation, you know, COVID-19 is, you know, certainly, but also just violence and the disconnection that we're having, right? So a lot of times we promote connectivity. You know, here's a time where we can't do that, you know, and we don't know how it's going to impact future generations. I mean, this could be a turning point, you know, in a negative way, possibly. So I think in general, we should be checking in with young people and just, you know, people that we love, right, and know. But certainly during this time, this has to be an extra effort to say, what's really going on? What do you think about this? And it's like, there's no right or wrong answer. Just want to know what your thoughts are and how you feel this may be impacting you.
Yeah, and I'll second all of that and say I think we've seen some really great examples of this already with the pandemic. And we've seen state leaders, Governor Pritzker had a town hall, we're speaking directly to youth, and we've seen a lot of, Mayor Lightfoot also did the same thing. And so I think we've seen a lot of really great examples of adults speaking directly to youth and answering their questions. And so, you know, encouraging that continues to happen as we move forward at the pandemic.
And related to that, as we talk about speaking directly to youth, what are some ways that we can also empower youth to use their own voices, to use their own actions and energy to positively contribute to addressing this situation? So it isn't just that they're being talked to, but we're also listening to them.
I think that's really important. Kids have really strong opinions, and many times they don't have the opportunity to express them, and they get frustrated because they feel like their voices don't matter. And so in a family setting, we want to make sure that kids are not just being told about what's going on. And sometimes it's better to hear from them what they think is happening and then clarify, because then we know for sure that they're getting it. Because for me, I have an 8-year-old daughter, and when I try to tell her stuff, she'll process it with what she knows, and she'll go, yeah, I know this, and I know that if I'm doing most of the talking, she's already gone somewhere else by the time I'm done talking. And so we want to first help them express themselves and then brainstorm ways that they can speak out and become active as part of the solution, whether it's with their peers or at school or with family in the neighborhood, so that they can be empowered.
Yeah, and I think to that point, parents can help then bring what they're hearing from their youth to their community. So helping, you know, with their school, like making sure their schools are also listening to the youth and not just listening to parents and other community members as well.
And speaking of school, there's been, over the last few weeks and months, raging debate over reopening schools, how to do that in a safe and smart way, whether we should bring students back in person or just do remote learning. And obviously this has caused a lot of stressor, again, for both the students and their parents, who many of them will be home with them because they're not back at work. So how do we help young people deal with that stress, the stress of either having to go to school every day under these conditions, or the stress of having to do virtual school at home?
It's a tough one. I think that we want to make sure that we have honest and age-appropriate conversations so that we can have a safe space for kids to be able to address their concerns about either having to be away from their loved ones or the health of a loved one. They may be stressed out because they have to do remote learning and they're tired to being in the house, and they might want to be outside or with their friends, or they might be concerned about their safety in light of what is happening. And so usually to try to address stress, we want to be able to, we started with talking about the open conversations. We also want to have a space where people can feel that they find their calm and their peace and are able to cope with the distress and get some space to minimize the distress and to relax. There's also, there needs to be an opportunity for kids to articulate what their concerns are and then have an opportunity to practice. One of the things that we talk about in anxiety treatment is trying to figure out a way to face different situations by breaking it down into small steps. And so if there's something that a child or a family member is having a really hard time doing, but they need to do in order to get through, let's break it down into small doable things and gradually figure out a way to cope and get through the next step. So initially we're not going to be able to get it all done, but we can at least know that that's where we're getting to. We have to kind of be understanding for each other.
Yeah, I just want to add that it's important for us to create opportunities for young people to check in with us. You know, so a lot of times when you deal with youth, you know, and you are coming to them about something, they can, you know, maybe consider you as being overbearing, right? Because you're just trying to get this message across to them all the time. And I think this is a time where we have to just, we put it out there, we leave the door open for them and be respectful. And we can check in still, but, you know, not like, you know, all day, every day, you know, to the point where they're just like, you know, they don't want to hear it at all, you know, so leave it on them, for them to take initiative sometimes, and I think a lot of them will. But I think leaving the door open and just creating that opportunity is something that's important.
So we've also talked about, you know, just building off the point you just made, Norman, about leaving the door open and allowing them to, creating the opportunity for them to come talk to us. There are times where parents have to step up and be that voice for children and be those advocates for them. And, you know, whether depending on the age of the child or even with the subject matter that's being dealt with. And we all have to navigate systems. Parents have to navigate systems for themselves, and children have to navigate systems as well. What are ways that we can help parents be better advocates for those children, especially having to navigate the many systems that they have to deal with, whether it's education, social services, unfortunately at times the juvenile justice or criminal justice system? What are those positive ways that parents can support and be advocates?
So when I think about this pandemic and people being in closer quarters with their families for longer periods of time, and I remember watching something on the news recently where some parents are like, they're acknowledging the fact that they're not good teachers, right? So their kids are at home, and I think at first they were like, oh, no problem. You know, I got a fourth grader, I could teach them science and math and all these different things. Now they're saying, you know what, I'm not a teacher. You know, I don't know like all the details. I know some math problems or so forth, but I really can't teach my child on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's the thing that we have to acknowledge as adults, is that there's some things that we're strong at, and maybe there's some things that we're going to need help with. And this is one of those things where understanding what really goes into the support of young people and families during this time is something that most people don't know how to do, right? And it really begs us to rely on the experts to pull them in. Maybe we're doing more surfing the internet, doing research as far as finding out how can we be supportive. The city of Chicago has a website to deal with COVID and other issues. I mean, Dr. Suarez's group, I mean, there's definitely resources that are out there, but we have to say to ourselves, one, we're not experts, and we need to go out and find the information that's necessary so we can provide the best support to our young people and our families. And I think if we do that, we're in good shape.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. I think one of the things, and when we're doing that research and trying to be able to find the right advocates, is, you know, also just knowing your rights as a parent, knowing the rights of your youth. There are a lot of really great resources and legal aid organizations throughout the state, and websites that kind of help outline your legal rights across the different systems. So whether it's school, I think school is a really great example. We want to work as collaboratively as we can with the school and in partnership, but we also know that there are times when the schools have failed our youth and our families. And so parents being able to know that they have legal rights when it comes to the schooling of their youth, and same when it's social services or juvenile justice. So being able to know that you have legal rights that you can pursue, and being able to access those experts as well can really help make a difference.
And that's particularly important in these days because we don't have, with so many things being done remotely, even health services, many of them are being done by telehealth. People are not in the room to be able to ask more questions, and the people who usually would identify challenges are not there to have the contact. And so it's really the parents have to speak out more, to seek out solutions to the people that you do have in contact with. And everybody's overwhelmed, but we gotta push a little harder so that we get the needs met that are there. And there might be some, there's a lot of challenges in terms of limited resources, but there are some new resources that are becoming available and new services. But if we don't speak out and ask, people don't know to refer us to them. And so we do have to speak out when we have a need. And everybody who's working with youth and families has to be very diligent and vigilant to be able to connect people to the supports that they need.
So we've talked a lot about, accessing services, accessing different systems, and parents being advocates for their children to be able to do that and navigate those systems. One of the things that we know is that many of the families we support are low-income families of color, primarily African-American families. And traditionally, they have not been served well, adequately, equitably, fairly by systems. And that has created a lot of the foundation of the issues that we're dealing with now that have only been heightened and highlighted by the current crises that we're in, as we've seen the disproportionality of the impact of COVID on Black and Brown communities. So Amanda, I'm gonna ask, can you speak a little bit to some of those underlying or pre-existing conditions that are now exacerbating the stress and the strain that parents and families are going through now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really critical point for everyone is to acknowledge that while the pandemic has made things seem different for a lot of families, they have already been struggling, deeply struggling with a lot of issues. So I think we see a lot of disparities. So when we think about the systems, we know that in school systems that Black and Brown youth overwhelmingly are disciplined more often. They represent higher populations of students with disabilities. And so trying to access the correct services they need, and how that has been made a lot more challenging now that everything's remote. Trying to make sure that students are getting the services if they have special education plans is harder. Just even acknowledging whether or not the families have access to the resources they need to even do school remotely. Do they have access to the internet? Do they have the right technology that they need, the computers? I think we're seeing some really nice responses to some of that. So I know like Chicago is providing internet to 100,000 families is a good example. But it's not just school that we have already seen these significant disparities. We know that across health, and as you just mentioned, COVID, we know COVID is significantly disproportionately impacting Black and Brown communities. And so acknowledging that these health disparities have existed way longer than COVID is really important to acknowledge as well. We're also seeing this in other areas. So with social services, whether there's access to employment or to food, that has also been exacerbated again by COVID. So I think the struggle is that these are all pre-existing conditions that have just been made worse by COVID, but also provided a really great opportunity to try and address these conditions.
Yeah, I just want to add that so earlier this year when COVID hit, we have a partnership with Street Outreach that the city that we're working on with my office. And the street outreach workers, which typically work to address violence, so violence interruption, that type of work. When COVID hit, we immediately pivoted their work to include messaging around COVID, connection to resources around COVID. And during these last few months, not too many organizations were open. Many had closed, and they were working remotely. So they weren't on the streets, even though there were still a significant amount of people on the streets, hanging out, doing things, not wearing masks, that type of thing. So street outreach workers really started messaging, providing PPEs to people who were hanging out. And I think it really highlighted the fact that this is how we have to work, where regardless of what your role is and your connection to the family, you got to be thinking about what are some of the other things that that family may need, right? So if you're going in and you're focused on health or violence, you have to be thinking about what are some of the other needs that the family may have. Some organizations do that already, but some really stay in their lanes, right? And they're very siloed. And this is something where we have to be thinking, okay, well, how can I help this family with another issue that they're dealing with? And maybe that is something that's already being done by a partner that we have, and we could just, make that happen in a better way for that family. Because sometimes, they make contact with one group, then it's hard for them to make contact with another group. How can we be more helpful in coordination, right? And I think for me, this pandemic really highlighted the fact that you have families who, for whatever reason, they've been disconnected. And whatever the entry point is, we have to use that to bring in other resources as well for them.
Yeah, well said. Yes, it absolutely heightens the fact that a lot of times we send parents and families in multiple different directions, go here for this support, go here for that support. And, basically put them in the rat race, like to do that. And this hopefully will help us rethink how we connect as providers, as support systems for them, to align our resources so that families don't have to bounce from one place to one place and get from one part of the city to another part of the city. And so when you begin to factor in transportation and other issues, you just create more barriers to them getting the support that they need. And so to Norma's point, it's how do we organize ourselves differently and better so that parents can go to fewer places or one place to get the support, where the partners have aligned themselves to coordinate services versus sending them to various places for coordinated services.
And it's very tough because services are very specialized and people are trained to look at the one thing that is their specialty. And so service providers need to do a better job of looking at the bigger picture and thinking about the multiple needs that families have and what may be underlying some of the things that brought them to you. And at in the flip side, but families have to become really good advocates and say, yes, I'm here for this, but there's this other thing that I have. And so we have to encourage them and empower them to speak out and ask for the help and the support.
So we've talked a lot about, what we've recognized parents can do and even what the community at large can do to support our young people through this period. What many of us know, whether you're a parent or not, but certainly if you're a parent, you know that once you become a parent, there's no magic book, there's no handbook that they give you with your bouncing baby to say, here's how you do all of this stuff the right way. And we all learn from, I wish I had known this 5 years ago versus what I know now. So let's spend some time talking about how we can support parents through this time, because as the primary caregivers and support system for our young people, we have to make sure that they feel supported and well adjusted and whole in what they do. If you think about the analogy, when you're on a plane, they say the adults to put the mask on themselves first before they put it on their children. And so what are some things that we can do or we can point parents to help support them as they're dealing with the dual stress of what's happening to them, but also then needing to deal with what's happening to their children?
So I'll start. I think at the very least, and this doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I just want to start with this part. I think whatever programming that we're doing, we should meet the parents, and I know there's programs that, they work with young people and, they don't have to meet the parents, some don't. And I think it's really important that the parents know that the program wants to meet them, wants to engage them. I mean, some parents don't want to have anything to do with the program. I understand that, but I think at the very least we should offer it, right? And then if we can go deeper with, again, my point about just like, sometimes the parents need services. And I'm not just talking about like parenting skills, it's like, that's a given, yes. But sometimes they have issues that they haven't dealt with. And I've seen it where parents saw that their young person was getting services and the parent said, I want to get some services too. You know what I mean? So I think, again, the young person could be an entry point to working with that family. So whether it's the parent, whether it's, siblings or whoever's living in that household that's having an impact on that youth, we need to be thinking more comprehensively. But certainly getting at those parents, letting them know that there's opportunities for them. I mean, we have workers who they're helping the parents get jobs because it's going to help the entire system, the family system, if the parent is in a better position. So whether they need mental health, employment, substance abuse treatment, all those things are items that should be considered when going into doing this work with an individual or family.
And parents in particular are dealing with having to manage their own stress, their work, whether it's in person or remotely, or whether they're out of work. But they, on top of that, and they're obviously the parenting, which is stressful, but they also have to adopt the job. So there's a lot of stress and resentment about having to also be teachers and spend, like, how do you find the time to get everything done? And then now I have to take care of my needs, and when does that happen? And there's a lot of guilt around, taking the time to do the things that you need to do to de-stress. And kids are, if you're working from home, kids are home all the time, and there's no space for you to take care of yourself. And one of the things that can be very helpful is to say that modeling healthy coping behaviors and modeling taking care of yourself is actually a good thing for your children to learn, and that it's okay to take the time that you need, and you can use it as a teaching opportunity. I'm really stressed right now, honey, and I can't talk about this and that. I need just 1 minute. I had a really stressful situation happen, and I need to do this thing. I'm going to be back with you so soon, and we're going to have so much fun. But right now I need to take this moment. And when we teach the kids that we need a break too, and it feels horrible to say I need a break from you. I don't want to, that there's something about you that I need, And so the message is that I want to show you that when you're overwhelmed, there's something that you can do about it. But sometimes you have to do it by yourself for a little bit before you can be with others. Just like when you're upset, honey, you need some time. I need some time too. And so I want us to practice together, okay? And so this is going to be my time, and then later you're going to need that time, and I'm going to help you and give you that space that you need. And so that message that they need that space too, and model it for the kids, and to have everybody find that plan. When we're overwhelmed, this is what we're going to do. Mommy's going to do this, dad's going to do that, and kids are going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to set it up ahead of time. And we know that this is the time, this is what we do when we're overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's great points. I mean, it really, to me, kind of boils down to like being mindful, right? And this idea of like checking in with yourself, like meditating. And I think this is something that adults should clearly be doing, but also getting it to the young person level as well. And there's been some schools, around the country and so forth that really push starting the day with that type of like check-in, just to understand where you are. I think we've associated taking time for yourself with being selfish. It's like people feel so like guilty about like, I can't really do that, because I have to like take care of my family and have to be on. But it's like the analogy you said about, being on the airplane. And I think we have to take care of ourselves, whether we are parents, friends, workers, like this is our profession, like you have to like take care of yourself. And oftentimes we have compassion for other people. We see people, we're like, oh, this person needs help, and we're very compassionate about others, but we're not compassionate about ourselves. We don't have that same compassion to ourselves. And I think that's something that we have to push. And if people want to describe it as being selfish, fine. Maybe we need to be a little bit more selfish when it comes to like just taking care of ourselves, and not feel bad about that, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. It certainly shows up in how we parent. It shows up in how we do our jobs, like our state of mind, our demeanor when we come into our workplace or at home impacts those around us. And so being our best selves allows us to be our best for others. And so that's so very important. We're about to wrap up. This has been a great discussion, and I do want to remind folks that we'll put up a lot of the resources that you can access that have been referenced here at the end of this presentation, so that you can be able to get to those on your own and have that with you. I do want to ask each of you if there's any last thought or comment you want to make and leave for the group, to share that now, and then we will begin to close up the session. So if there's anything that we haven't covered that is burning inside of you that this is important and I really want folks to know it, now is the time to share that for our audience. So Amanda, I'll start with you, not to put you on the spot, but closing thoughts.
Sure. I think my main closing thought is just, I think we've seen this also in the theme of what we've discussed, that this is a really difficult time for everyone, but we've seen some really incredible reactions to all of these challenges. We clearly are very adaptable and flexible and very resilient, and have seen some phenomenal communities helping each other in really unique and new ways. And so I think that despite how difficult this time is, that I have a lot of hope for the future in addressing all of these issues, and just by how we've reacted to this. So I think everyone should have some hope.
Thanks. Lisa?
Just a couple more thoughts. I think that with all the things that we're going through, it's very easy to feel that sense of loss of control and that we can't do anything to change what's around us, and we have to help caregivers and kids feel that sense of mastery again and develop a sense of safety as well. And so for mastery, one of the things that I try to work on with my daughter is identifying one goal for the day. So every morning we do a check-in and say, okay, what's one thing you want to accomplish today? And then as the day goes by, I try to check in with her and make sure that help her achieve that goal or modify that goal so that then she feels motivated. And sometimes she goes to bed and she's excited about what's happening tomorrow, even though it's exactly the same as the last 5 million days that we've had, or it feels like that. But she's excited because she has that one thing that she wants to do that's a little different, or continue this project that she has. She's crafted her way through the pandemic. So my house has a lot of more stuff. The other thing is about safety, trying to make sure that we find that physical but also emotional sense of safety, and connecting with each other in ways that we can feel safe, so that we can continue to feel what we need as people that has been taken away because of the challenges that we're going through, trying to get some of it back. And so the things that we miss and we are most distressed by, let's find a way to figure out how can we try to meet that goal, but also being kind and understanding to ourselves, because we can't get it all done and we're not superhuman, although everyone right now is being asked to access parts of ourselves that we didn't know we even had, but we have to give ourselves a break.
Great, thank you. Norman.
Yes, so things were definitely challenging and difficult before the pandemic. So the pandemic really just kind of magnified things even more. So we were dealing with just like the perfect storm. There's so many things that are happening right now. And our tendency is going to be like, we want to like make changes quickly. We want to see things, get on the right track, people get, on the right track. But I think it's also a time that we have to be patient, and really understand that, even though we're in this circumstance, it's going to take time to get out of it, and it's going to take time to do it in a way that's that causes the least amount of harm, if you will. So I think we have to be at the same time caring and compassionate, but we really have to be patient. And I think that's something that when I look at our young people, I just don't think very many people are patient with them. It's like it's so quick to judge them, come back at them, and there's no care and there's no patience with them, because it's like, I mean, as was mentioned, their brains aren't fully developed, so how do we expect them to be functioning like, 40 and 50-year-olds, when there's so much that they haven't had. And I just think we have to pour into them, but also give it time to manifest as well.
Well said by each of you. And this is what makes you all experts in your field, and happy to have you on this call to share your insights and information that hopefully will have a lasting impact on our families. So as you said, this isn't, new stuff. We've been here for a long time dealing with these issues, and it is going to take long-term strategies to address these long-term and these very entrenched issues, and the patience to stick with things that we know work. Many of our programs, we get funded to do things in year-long cycles, as if working with a young person or his family, that we can change their life trajectory in a year when they've been dealing with decades and generations, long issues. And so the patience also comes in our investment in the time and the resources it takes to support families beyond that, those year-long cycles that we typically program or fund in. And that's a part of the work of Bright Promises. We're in this for the long haul. We're not looking at this as what can we do right now. We understand that there are many issues that families are facing that we have to be reactive to in the moment and respond to, but we also have to be very responsive to the long-term trajectory of these issues. And so Bright Promises, we try and play in both places. what do we need to react to now, but how do we prepare ourselves for dealing with these entrenched issues over time? And then a prime example of that is, and many of you are familiar with our focus panel process, where we bring folks like you together and say, what are these major issues that are impacting young people, that are impacting families, and what are innovative approaches that we can take to solve these issues? Our last focus panel, we dealt with, our recommendation was to focus on social emotional learning. And we've been doing that in supporting organizations that then support families, their children and the parents in developing, healthy social emotional mindsets in ways of thinking and ways of behaving. And so we're about to go into our next focus panel conversation in a few weeks, where we'll be looking for what is that next big thing. And it won't be anything that we haven't discussed. It won't be anything that, is not like a new discovery, but what's a fresh, innovative, and effective approach that we can take to address these issues. And so our commitment to, one, even bringing you all together was to begin to identify areas that we can support families, primarily our youth, but also to demonstrate that, we have some forward thinking, some long-term thinking that we would like to bring to bear. So I just want to thank each of you again for taking the time to be on this discussion, for sharing your insights. And I also think, insight should always lead to impact. So we're not doing this just to wax rhapsodic about what we know, but we're actually doing it to apply what we've heard to meaningful solutions. And so again, we'll put up links to a lot of the resources that parents and caregivers and other stakeholders can use that have been referenced on the call today. And want to say thank you to everybody. Keep fighting the good fight. We're in it for the long haul, and let's look at this as opportunities and not just barriers. Let's not look at this situation as we're in a crisis, woe is me, but what are our opportunities to get better, to do better, and to do right by the families and the communities that we support. And so hopefully that's the forward thinking we'll all take in a positive approach. And thank you all again for being on the call.
Hi, my name is Rich Excel, and I'm on the board of Bright Promises Foundation. I want to thank everyone for joining us this week for our first ever virtual gala, a celebration of the amazing organizations with whom we work. Our expert panelists did a terrific job of sharing their knowledge with you. As you saw from their presentations, donations to Bright Promises Foundation are able to help low-income children and their families who continue to be significantly impacted by COVID-19. Donations go directly to supporting these children and families and their evolving needs. In addition, as violence in our neighborhoods continues to rise, we will also expand opportunities to support children's mental health and to provide parents with the tools to support their children. It is because of the impact that Bright Promises has on the children of our area, our future, that I was initially drawn to this organization. It is because of these children that I ask you to join me in supporting Bright Promises Foundation. Finally, I want to thank our generous sponsors, our host committee members, and our event co-chairs, without whom none of this would be possible. The videos from both nights will be available on our website, www.brightpromises.org. You can view them and share them, and I hope you do. You can also donate here, as well as finding other ways to give. I hope all of you and your families stay safe and healthy.